We are taking a look at some of the requests being made of the new federal government in certain specific areas, one being crime and what is happening with the so-called buyback program when it comes to guns, and the crime platform that was released during the election campaign. Because we did hear from Mark Carney before he was elected, before he became the Prime Minister in the election, about what they were doing when it comes to fighting crime.
We will quickly reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, to the experts, not to the gun industry.
That was just part of the comments that Mark Carney made during the election campaign. Well, joining me now is Wes Winkel, Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association President. Wes, thank you for coming back on the show.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
You have put out a news release with some points on what you would like to see the federal government do when it comes to firearms, when it comes to laws we have in Canada. What would you like to see, or what do you think the priorities are for the federal government when it comes to that?
Well, we'd like to see more of a crime-fighting approach to firearms policy where we are trying to actually deal with the demand portion rather than continue to attack the supply of firearms into Canada. The supply chain has been very well documented that the domestic supply chain of legal firearms is not the criminal source of firearms, and we continue to attack the criminal or the domestic source, but not the criminal sources. And we're just trying to make sure that we get the government focused on trying to reduce firearms crime and not continue to attack licensed sport shooters and hunters.
Where do things stand right now with, again, the so-called buyback program, and I suppose what this new government is continuing with what was introduced under the Trudeau government?
Well, it's a very convoluted situation right now. We have a May of 2020 firearms prohibition that there's an eligibility for buyback for firearms retailers and businesses only. There is still no buyback initiated for individuals. There's been no option for them to do any disposal at all. And then there's been many, many models subsequently banned afterwards on many other prohibitions that are not eligible by anyone for a buyback. So really the buyback has barely been initiated, and it's already run into some problems on the business side, not being able to deal with the volume. And we haven't even really started opening the eggshell here, what's going on. So it's only one very small portion that's being dealt with. There's still the firearms that were banned back in 2020. We were told that there was such an urgent requirement for public safety to ban these that we had to bypass all parliamentary process and do it by order in council, this prohibition. But yet they remain in the gun cabinets of shooters all across the country. They haven't moved now in 5 years, and there still is no plan in place to have those bought back.
And like you said, and I think this point has been raised before, and even with the freeze on some firearms, on handguns, the true issue was public safety, and these guns being out there was what was making people unsafe, to have a negative impact on hunters. But is that happening?
It absolutely is happening. The term hunting rifle is something that we constantly have a government and people that are ignorant to firearms constantly trying to separate firearms into classes of what's used for hunting and what's not. And I can tell you that there are many, many hunting rifles, even my own personal ones, that have been prohibited. And there was many more that were done just as early as this spring, especially from some of our compromised hunters, like our disabled hunters. A lot of them have trouble with some of the manual run older style actions, and they need the more modern style firearms because they are lighter and easier to operate. And a lot of those have been prohibited, and it's been extremely unfortunate.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Wes Winkel. He is the president of the Canadian Sporting Arms and Ammunition Association, and we are talking about what the association would like to see the new federal government do. Wes, you talked a bit about classification, because I know that's come up as well. And again, the Prime Minister during the campaign talked about classifications being done by the RCMP or being done by the professionals, not by the industry. But I know you have raised these concerns, as many others have as well, that a lot of the classifications were based on a picture of a certain firearm or a certain gun and are quite arbitrary. Has that changed at all?
It has not. It's got more convoluted and more confusing. We really have no idea as an industry what the RCMP is doing with their classifications situation. Because up till 2020, the firearms policy has always gone by mechanical definition. And it got changed in 2020 to what they called a style. So the government uses the term assault style firearm. So they're not saying that it's an assault firearm. They're saying it looks like one, or it's the style of one. So the problem when you go to that is that it's all arbitrary, and there's no way for us to know, because there's no mechanical definition, what will be legal and what won't. So we go ahead and import a bunch of firearms for hunters based on what we know as being legal now, and then 4 months later they ban those as well. So we have no way of knowing what's going to happen, and it's confusing. We have so many types of firearms that are prohibited, and then there's literally the exact same type of firearm, but just with a different manufacturer's name or model that is perfectly legal for sale. It's ludicrous. The policy, the RCMP is a great law enforcement agency with a storied tradition in our country, but they don't understand firearms and they don't classify properly. And just like any other industry, without consulting the industry, it makes no sense to bring policy forward.
So what could fix this? Would it be more consultation with industry, or what would you like to see?
Yes, more consultation with industry is definitely needed, but also there has to be a rewind and a proper sit-down and with industry to figure out how to get proper firearms policy put forward that it makes sense and still allows the industry to flourish in a legal environment, as well as with promoting public safety.
One other mention in the release that your organization put out, and I think I had read this at some point, but I forgot that this was also an issue. And you talk about ammunition and the accessibility of ammunition for, again, hunters, for legal, law-abiding gun owners. Canada Post won't ship it. So how are people getting it if you live in more rural or remote communities? What's happening there?
Well, the short answer is they're not. And that's the problem, is that it's become extremely difficult to get in those remote areas. We've lost almost all legal carriers to those areas. And now we have some of our Indigenous communities and very remote communities that need firearms and ammunition for their survival, not just for hunting, but also for defense against predatory animals. And they just cannot get access to it. And we're seeing, because of the prohibitions and the policies put forward by the federal government and the extreme decline in the amount of target ammunition being imported, we're seeing the cost of ammunition skyrocket to a point where it's not affordable for a lot of these remote communities and Indigenous communities.
Is it safety reasons that they're saying they won't ship it?
They've basically not given us any real cited reason. They've hid behind some policy. But it is our understanding that there's a real lack of understanding by Canada Post Corporation as to the nature of small arms ammunition and how stable it is, and that there is no danger whatsoever.
It's interesting to look at the requests or what you would like to see happen. I know others have echoed this as well. We will wait and see what the response is like. But Wes, let's leave it there for today. And thank you for coming back on the show.
I appreciate the opportunity.
That is Wes Winkel, the